Another way of creating automation is by recording it. We've referred to automation recording as automation write. We record the automation by arming parameter controls for automation write and then play the project back. Any changes we make in real time to those ARM controls is then recorded as automation and can later be edited using methods we've already looked at and some we'll look at later. It's possible to arm a parameter for automation write during playback. We can arm as many parameters on as many tracks as we want, and controls can be moved either using the mouse via the user interface or by using a control surface or other controller. Automation is only created for those controls that are actually moved during that playback session. Let's have a closer look at this. I'm going to switch to the lead guitar track and arm individual parameters on a track for automation. We do this by right-clicking on it and selecting Automation Write Enable from the context menu. The track's Write Enable button will display half lit to show that at least one parameter is armed, and the arm parameter will display red corners around it wherever that control is visible, be that the track view, the inspector or the console view. If I show the control bar, we can see in the mix module that the write icon also displays red as soon as one parameter is armed for writing. All automation write arming can be cancelled by clicking on this button. It's possible to arm every parameter on a track by clicking on the track's automation write button, which automatically lights completely red to indicate that all controls are armed. As you've just seen, clicking on it while it's already lit deactivates them. Note that this includes not only the track controls, but also all of the Pro Channel controls, as well as any effects that are in the tracks or buses effects bins. A single control can be disarmed by right-clicking on the control and deselecting its automation write option. For example, to deselect just the pan control, right-click and deselect the automation write enable option. That still leaves all the rest enabled. I'm going to turn off automation write on this track now and just arm the volume and the room reverb send level. I'm then going to use my control surface to tweak the levels as the project plays back. I could just as easily perform these actions using the mouse and user interface though. As I start playback and start to tweak the controls, you'll see the automation being drawn, and when I stop playback, the envelopes are actually created. Let's rewind to the start of the track. So let's start playback and tweak some of those controls. As you can see, the automation's now been created. Automation can be used in combination with grouping as well, so if you automate one control in a group, all other group members will respond to the single automation envelope. Now let's look at the automation write modes, as these affect the way that automation's created. To access these, we switch to the track or bus inspector, which is done by pressing Ctrl, Shift and I. To the right of the write mode header, there is a drop-down selector that allows us to choose from the three choices. They are touch, override and latch. This is a per track setting, so changing it here only affects the current in focus track, but it's quick groupable, so to do all tracks at once, just select them all and hold the control key down while making the change. So let's look at the differences. Touch first. Touch is the default and the legacy behaviour. Any existing automation data is left untouched and read while the transport is rolling. But as soon as any changes are made, fresh automation data overwrites the existing data. But once a control is released or mouse up happens, the existing automation takes over and is followed. Let's see that in use. As you can see, as I increased the volume, it followed my fader movement, but as soon as I released the control, it dropped back to the envelope. Next comes overwrite. In this mode, any existing automation for any ARM control is overwritten while the playback is rolling. If I select this now and press playback, you'll see that automation is drawn as I tweak controls, but as soon as I stop playback, automation that already exists is left untouched. The difference between this and touch is that automation does not stop writing until the transport is stopped. Let's see that in action. you can see, I reduced the volume slightly and then released the fader, and instead of reading the automation as it did in the touch mode, it just stayed at its current level and continued to write. Be warned that when this option is set, any armed controls will have any existing automation overwritten as soon as the transport starts to roll, so just be careful with it. Now let's look at latch mode. Latch mode is a combination of both the other modes. Think of it as a touch-triggered overwrite mode. When the transport first starts, automation is read, as in the touch mode, but as soon as the control is touched, overwrite becomes active and stays active until the transport is stopped. The difference between this and touch mode is that releasing a control does not stop automation being overwritten. The only way to stop it once automation has started is to stop the transport. Let's look at that one in action. As you'll have seen, when I first started that, the automation was being followed rather than overwritten, until at the point I touched the volume fader and the overwrite kicked in and then took over. While the track inspector's open as well, I'll just mention the time-based setting. This option controls what happens to automation if you change the tempo. On musical, it will stay with the tempo grid. If set to absolute, it stays in its absolute position and the tempo grid moves relative to the automation. Also new to X2 is the ability for automation recording to follow the punch settings. If you have punch points active in a project, any automation movement while recording automation will be ignored outside of the punch area. When this is combined with latch mode, any control movement made before the punch zone is followed, but won't be recorded until the punch selection is entered. So let's have a look at that. We select some punch points. Start the transport rolling, and as I move the controls, you'll see that the controls actually respond to the movement but are not recorded until the punch region is reached. As soon as the punch region is exited, the automation recording stops. It's also possible to take what's known as a snapshot. I'm going to take a snapshot of the chorus double ascend to show how this works. Snapshots create an envelope with a node at the current now time. They're very useful if you want to change parameter levels at a certain point, such as the start of a chorus. You can take snapshots at the old level, move on, and then take fresh snapshots. For example, if I rewind this project to the start, and I'll right-click on the chorus double ascend level and select Automation Snapshot. So you can see that's created an envelope for the automation send. There's no automation as such yet, so it shows as a dotted line. But now if I click the now time on verse 1 start, set a fresh level for the chorus double ascend, which I'll increase, right-click on it again and reselect Automation Snapshot, a node is now inserted at the now time, and the control will follow it. Snapshots can be taken on any controls. Once all of this automation is created, it's possible to edit it with the editing tools, and we'll be looking at that shortly. Now let's take a look at synth automation. Synth automation is similar to track and bus automation in the way it's created, either using the edit filter or recording it in real time using a controller on the synth's interface. We can also use the assign controls in the synth rack if there are any, and we looked at setting up these assign controls earlier. Remember, the edit filter is selected by the HUD, and any inserted synths will appear in the menu. There you'll find all of that automatable controls, and as you can see, for some synths this can be quite a lot. But remember that any selected synth controls will automatically be pushed to the top of the menu. Now see that Rapture's at the top, and already ARM controls are bold. So let's open the synth rack down in the browser and have a look at some of the assigned controls. Hide the inspector. Remember that we set these up earlier, and they can be shown or hidden using the Show Hide Assign Controls button. Here you can see I've already got some set up. These are armed for automation in exactly the same way as the other controls we've looked at. Simply right-click on them and select Automation Right Enable. Alternatively, all controls of the synth can be armed by clicking on the Synth's Automation Right button, either here in the synth rack, and remember for these buttons to be visible the browser needs to be either docked or floating, or from the synth's interface. Synth automation can be written to any track of your choice, not necessarily the instrument track or the synth's MIDI track. That's selected from the drop-down. It defaults to the synth track, but you can choose a different track from the All Tracks menu drop-down. Once written, it can be edited and broken out into lanes in exactly the same way as any audio or MIDI tracks automation can be, and we'll be looking at that shortly.